Hi, I'm Pam, and today I am ranking some video games. So today I'm going to be ranking adventure games that were not created by either Sierra or LucasArts. If you're interested in my ranking of those, I did that in a separate video, which will be linked somewhere. It was just far too many games to fit all of the adventure in one video. So to start out, what is an adventure game? Adventure has become a rather nebulous genre that currently includes anything from Uncharted to God of War, if you go by Game Awards categories. When I'm talking about adventure games, I am specifically looking at those graphic adventure games that were started, with Sierra and LucasArts and sort of came along from there. They focus on story and characters and puzzle solving. While some of the games I've included do have the occasional little action-y segment, what they're mostly focused on challenging is your puzzle-solving ability as well as your ability to think outside the box. So those are the ones that I'm including here. I have 57 to rank, so this is probably going to be a long one. Okay, so we've got the ranking list up here. You can't see all the games because it just takes up too much room and I want to leave room for some footage down at the bottom, but the rankings fairly self-explanatory. S are the best in the genre, A are excellent games, B are good games, C mediocre, and D I think are quite bad. I actually don't have any Fs for this category. I figured out while I was gathering all of the images for this, so I just left that off. So we're going to start alphabetically as normal, and the first game is Alfred Hitchcock Presents The Final Cut. And this was made in 2001 by Arxel Tribe, which is a developer I've not heard of before. But it has a little bit of action in this one, but you're playing a psychic detective who is investigating the case of an Alfred Hitchcock fan has been making a tribute movie, and the whole cast and crew disappeared. Possibly they were all horribly murdered, and you have to figure it out. I remember this one being just sort of a hodgepodge of Alfred Hitchcock references with some poor dialogue and sort of uninspired puzzle solving. I didn't think that this was a very good game, and I'm going to give Alfred Hitchcock Presents a D because I don't think it's a very good adventure game. Next up, we have Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of Orpheo's Curse. If you've watched my FMV video, you're going to see a couple things make an appearance here. This was, I believe, a 1994 game by Viacom. It is told like an episode of the show as like its own story that you control as these two characters go into an old cursed theater and find themselves stuck there. They need to figure out how to get out as well as help the ghosts inside. I really like this. It uses FMV both in scenes and in just images of the real actors going through things. And though this is meant for kids and sort of younger adults, I think it's still a very good game, and it holds up in terms of the puzzles and the story that it's trying to tell. It works out as a sort of standalone episode of the show pretty well, so I'm going to give Are You Afraid of the Dark a B. Belladonna is a game by a developer called Neckbolt, and it was made in 2015. It is a short adventure game where you play sort of a Frankenstein, except you're cuter than Frankenstein. And it's sort of turning that story on its head as you go through the manner of the place you've been created, sort of trying to figure out what's going on with you and interacting with various people within the house. I quite liked this one. The puzzles are definitely on the simpler side, but I think it's absolutely beautiful to look at, and I really like the story that it ends up telling, so Belladonna is getting a B. So next, I'm going to tackle a whole series together, and I'm going to go in release order rather than alphabetical, but this is the Blackwell series by Wadjet Games, who I think out of all the developers is one that really picked up the mantle of the adventure game masters and ran with it, whether they're developing their own games or publishing games from other people. And the Blackwell series is amazing. I think it's best played as a whole because it really does continue a story throughout the 5 games. The first one was released in 2006. The first game is the Blackwell Legacy, and this introduces us to the character Rosangela Blackwell, who figures out quite quickly in the game that she can see ghosts, and she has a ghost friend named Joey, and what she has to do is help the dead who are hanging around on Earth as ghosts sort of move on into the afterlife. So this first one is about her realizing that's, her lot in life and dealing with that. And I think it's good. It's a good start. However, they only improved from here. This was sort of, the roughest in terms of puzzle solving and things. Still a very good game though, so I'm going to give Legacy a B. The second game is Blackwell Unbound, and I really liked this one. In this one, you go back to the 70s and you play as Rosangela's aunt. And she also can see Joey, and they go through their thing of helping ghosts out. I felt like it was quite an improvement over the first game, so I'm going to give Blackwell Unbound an A. The third game is the Blackwell Convergence. And again, I really liked this one. I thought it was a fantastic story with really good voice acting, very good puzzles, and it continues on and calls back to a bunch of the things we learned in the second game from Rose's aunt, which I really liked. So Convergence is also getting an A. The Blackwell Deception, I felt was a little bit of a step back from the previous 2 games. It was still a very solid title, but it didn't seem to tie in with the rest of the series as much, and I just found it not quite as interesting. Again, though, still a very solid game, so Blackwell Deception is a B. And then finally, the Blackwell Epiphany, which I think just wraps up the entire story and the character arcs in an absolutely beautiful way. I think if you're gonna start these games, you really have to play right through to the end, because I really love how they ended the series out, so I'm gonna give Blackwell Epiphany an A as well. Next up, we have Broken Age, and this was Tim Schafer's return to video games. This is by Double Fine. It first came out in 2014. This was one of the biggest Kickstarters ever. They were looking for, I think, $400,000, and they ended up making like $3.5 million toward this game. Still, this ended up getting released in 2 parts, a year apart, because it tells the story of 2 characters, and you really only get one side of it in Act 1. And this game didn't really land for me. I didn't find the humor hit like I usually find it does in Double Fine games. I didn't particularly love the puzzles either, and I really didn't like that it was broken into 2. I played through Act 1 when it came out, and by the time Act 2 came out, I had sort of completely lost interest, so I still haven't played Act 2, so I can't speak to how that continues on, whether it improves or possibly gets worse. But Broken Age was just an okay adventure game for me, a little bit on the disappointing side, so it's getting a C. Broken Sword, The Shadow of the Templars was made by Revolution Software, and it came out in 1996, I think? Yes, 1996. And I think this is a decent game. It has really beautiful art and animation, a sort of cartoony style. You're playing a tourist in Paris who witnesses an assassination and then hooks up with a photographer, and you solve the mystery of this. It ends up going into Knights Templar and things like that. I tend to like my adventure games to either be funny or like genre things, so horror or sci-fi or fantasy like. This one is a little bit on the mundane side for me, but I do think it's still a decent game, so I'm going to give this one a B. I don't like the series I've only played this one. I don't like this game as much as a lot of people do. I think it's a good game, but yeah, a little bit on the, sort of normal side for me, I guess. Next up is A Case of Distrust, which was released in 2018 by The Wandering Ben. And this is a very stylish detective game. You play a private investigator during Prohibition era, so you're going to all kinds of like speakeasies and jazz clubs and things like that. It has a really cool art style. It's just very much like outlines of things. Like you can't see things' faces, you can just see the details of their clothing or details of rooms and things like that. And it's pretty interesting. It's very well written. I really like the music involved. There's not a ton in the way of puzzle solving, but there is some sort of sleuthing around and looking for clues to solve the mystery you've been hired to solve. And I think A Case of Distrust is pretty decent, so I'm giving it a B. Next up is The Cat Lady, which is a 2012 game by Harvester Games. This is the middle entry of a trilogy called Devil Came Through Here. It's not a direct series of sequels, so you can play the games in any order you liked. I played this one first, and you play a woman named Susan Ashworth who is very depressed, and at the beginning of the game she commits suicide, but it doesn't go exactly as planned, and she finds herself brought back to life by a seemingly evil queen who wants her to do some nefarious work for her. And I love The Cat Lady. I think it's an excellent game. Like, it's quite gory. There's a lot of psychological damage happening to everyone in it, but I just found that the writing and the storytelling was extremely good. I love the aesthetic of it and the visuals and the music especially, and the puzzles that are there are good puzzles. They're not too obtuse, they're fairly easy to wrap your head around, but they provide a nice diversion to all of the storytelling that's going on in the story. So The Cat Lady gets an A. It's definitely one of my favorite adventure games. The Charnel House trilogy was made by Owl Cave Games, released in 2015, and it is a game split into 3 acts, each following a different character through the game. It is also a sort of psychological horror game. This one doesn't really have too many sort of outright scary things happening in it, but it's just more of a sense of constant unease that's building up. And if you know what a charnel house is, and if you look at the names of the chapters of the game, you probably have some idea of where the story is going, but how it gets there is very well told, and I really like the Charnel House trilogy, so that is also getting an A. Chicken Police Paint It Red is a noir detective game that features you playing a chicken, and everything is basically an anthropomorphic animal. This was made by The Wild Gentleman and released in 2020. It is very heavy on the detective aspect, so you're finding clues, you're asking people the right questions. There is a deduction piece of the game where you have to put various pieces of evidence together in order to come to the right conclusions. There are a ton of animal puns in this game, which I quite enjoyed. I did find that the end was a little disappointing. It was just pretty sort of predictable and tropey for a game that features a chicken, but I did like playing through this, and Chicken Police gets a B. The Dark Side Detective was developed by Spooky Doorway and released in 2017. And here you play a detective solving a series of supernatural mysteries. It's sort of broken up into cases, and I played it back when it first released. I'm pretty sure they've been releasing sort of new cases for it as time went on, but I just played the original batch. And in terms of puzzle solving, it's just okay. Like, it's fairly straightforward to play. Whether or not you like this game is very much going to be determined by how well the humor resonates with you, and it didn't really for me. The humor was 90%, hey, look at this pop culture reference, and that just, sort of got old after a while. It was kind of like the Ready Player One of video games. So, it wasn't a bad game, it really was relying on humor, and the humor rarely landed with me, so I'm gonna give Darkside Detective a C. Yet another detective game, we have Detective Grimoire Secret of the Swamp, which came out in 2014 from SFB Games. And again, you are solving a murder in this swamp. A strange creature is accused of it, and you have to go and collect clues and question witnesses to find out what's going on. In addition to the normal sort of adventure game puzzles, they have this cool sort of mini game where you're basically putting a phrase together, so you have different things to choose from. So you can say like, this character is too stupid, smart, messy, like you go through a bunch of verbs, to have noticed, and then you go through another bunch of words or phrases, so you can like put together a sentence and see if that makes sense, and then present it to someone, which is a kind of cool take on it, which I haven't really seen in games before. I think Detective Grimoire is a very decent game, and it is a B. Next up is Don't Escape 4 Days to Survive. This came out in 2019 from Scriptwelder, who I believe is just one single developer. And I really like this because it combines point-and-click adventure with some survival and also some decision-making. You play a man who has these strange visions, and he is on an Earth that is about to be destroyed by the moon, basically crumbling down and crashing into Earth. And you need to figure out what you're going to do in the 4 days until this happens. And as you go, you find other characters who will come along with you. There's some resource management in keeping yourself safe through the night and being able to solve the various puzzles in the game. And there are multiple endings. There's also, you can play the game through once, and your second playthrough will be different based on what you learned in the first, which I think is very cool. I really liked this game a lot, and I'm giving it an A. So, Downfall is the first game made in that Devil Came Through series by Harvester Games. It originally came out, I believe, in 2009, but later on it was remade in the style of the Cat Lady, and that is the version that I played. And just like the Cat Lady, this is a very dark game, very gory at times, a lot of disturbing themes. You are playing a man named Joe who was gone on a vacation with his girlfriend, and they really seem to hate each other. And Downfall didn't work for me as good as the Cat Lady because though Susan might not be the most likable character, she is at least sympathetic, where Joe's just a dick. So it's not as fun to play him. And I found all of the games are pretty depressing, but Downfall was like extra depressing. But I still thought it was a good game. I, don't regret playing it, so I'm gonna give Downfall a B. Dropsy is a 2015 game by Tendershoot, and this is a really interesting one. You play this clown who's honestly pretty terrifying to look at, but all he wants is to make people happy and give them hugs, and it's really nice. It's also a really cool take on the genre because rather than being very wordy, as many of these are, there's not really any dialogue. You just get sort of little pictograms or emotions above people's head that sort of communicate what they're saying or what they're trying to get from you. And I thought this was just a very clever game with some really good puzzles, and again, I liked just sort of the take on the genre, so Dropsy, I'm gonna give an A to, because I thought it was very, very well done. Fran Bow is by Kill Monday Games, and it was released in 2015. This is a story about a little girl traumatized after witnessing the murder of her parents, and she's currently in an asylum. And it takes place sort of in like the real world and her dream world as she's going around trying to sort of figure things out. It's very much about mental health and how that's treated and how you deal with it yourself. And I really liked that. I'm going to give Fran Bow a B. It's got a really cool sort of style and atmosphere, and yeah, it's a good game. Next up is Gemini Rue, which is a cyberpunk adventure game. It was first released in 2011 by Joshua Nernberger and published by Wadjet, so it looks a little bit familiar. I think this is a good game. I like that you play as two different characters. One is searching for information on his missing brother, and you're going through this very sort of dark and grim kind of world that is, you know, sort of taken over by crime syndicates, and you're struggling your way through the world. I don't remember a ton about how the story goes, but I do remember really liking the atmosphere and the dialogue and things like that, so I'm going to give Gemini Rue a B. So the Goosebumps game came out in 2015 by Way Forward, and again, this is sort of like a big hodgepodge of the various books. You'll see all kinds of characters and references to the books, and if you're a fan of Goosebumps, this will probably land for you. It does seem a little for kids, which, let's be frank, the Goosebump books are for kids, so it would probably be better if you were, you know, younger. I found the game as a whole pretty forgettable overall in terms of the puzzles, the dialogue, the writing. Occasionally there was one like, oh, I remember that from the books, but generally pretty forgettable as a game. So Goosebumps is getting a C. The Haunted Island, a frog detective game, is made by Grace Bruxner. It came out in 2018, and this is a first-person adventure where you play a frog who is out to solve a mystery. And the big draw about this game is that it's absolutely hilarious. It's just got the most cute, funny characters and little like asides, and it's just really funny. That's really what makes the game so good. It's a pretty short one. It's on the simple side. You're sort of finding various clues, which is where most of the gameplay comes in, but it's the dialogue that really makes this game special, so I'm going to give Haunted Island a B. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was out in 1996 by Cyber Dreams. It is based on the Harlan Ellison short story of the same name. I do have a full review of this on my channel from a few years back if you want to watch it. And I like this game because of the voice acting and the writing. That's all very strong. Harlan Ellison plays Am, the supercomputer who has killed everyone on Earth and is now perpetually torturing the 5 living humans and making them relive their past and presenting them with their greatest fears. And I really like that part of the game. I find it's very good up until the end, where I think mechanically it kind of falls apart a little bit, but still an enjoyable game, especially if you like your games dark and twisted. So this is getting a B. Jenny LeClue Detective-Vu was a nice little surprise. I picked this up on Switch a while back. It came out in 2019. It is by Mography Studios, and you play Jenny LeClue, who is a young girl in a small town, always trying to help her mother, who teaches about crime or forensics, something like that, in the local university. And Jenny's always trying to help solve crimes, but then her mother gets accused of murder, so Jenny goes out to try to clear her name. And I just found this extremely well put together. I found the whole style of it was delightful. The voice acting and the writing were very, very good, and the puzzles were puzzles of all sorts, and I really enjoyed all of them, as well as just going around the world that you were presented. So Jenny LeClue is getting an A. John Stone's Blackstone Chronicles is a game from 1998 by Legend Entertainment, and it continues on with the story found in the Blackstone books. I have not read any of those, so it's possible I was probably missing a lot of references in this game. But I didn't particularly care for this. You play I think, one of the Blackstones, who goes into this mental institution and, finds out the history of it. It just was kind of on the dull side. Like, it wasn't particularly thrilling at all. A lot of the game is just looking at various things and having not the most exciting narrator in the world tell you about them. Very little of this is memorable to me, but it just seemed like something that, was a property they took from the popular books and didn't really do much with it as a game. So I'm going to give Blackstone Chronicles a C. Kathy Rain was released in 2016 by Clifftop Games. You play Kathy, a university student who's, on the edgy side. She rides a motorcycle, she has pink streaks in her hair, she chain smokes, and she goes back to the small town she grew up in because her grandfather died under mysterious circumstances. And you're trying to find out what those are. And I thought it was a decent game. I liked Kathy as a character, but none of the other characters in the game really stood out or got developed in any interesting way. The story starts off fairly mundane, and then it goes a little bit off the rails at the end of it. But overall, I thought it was an enjoyable time. I feel like, a couple little improvements could be made, and there is a director's cut that came out a couple years later. I haven't tried that. Maybe that changes things. But Kathy Rain, a solid game. It's a B. So in 2015, Activision, who has the King's Quest license, decided to do something with it, and they gave it to developers called The Odd Gentleman to release an episodic series called King's Quest. And this is about King Graham and all of the characters you know from the original Sierra series, but it's just a new spin on it and new stories being told. And this was all over the place for me. I found of the 5 chapters, a couple of them were terrible. One of them was really good. The first chapter just had an excessive amount of backtracking. Everything you had to do, you had to go to this screen and then go 8 screens away to use it and then go 7 screens back to pick up something you saw before. It was just dreadful, and the first chapter is way too long. It's like 7 hours or something. So didn't get off to a good start. There's one chapter in it, I think maybe chapter 6, where you're playing as Valenice, and that's actually a really nice, sort of concise, well-told story with some decent puzzles in it that I really liked. But then the end of the game wraps up with basically an entire chapter of just block-pushing puzzles, and I hate block-pushing puzzles. So King's Quest was, despite having the one chapter that I really enjoyed, most of them I didn't like at all, so King's Quest gets a D. The Last Door came out in 2013, and it is by The Game Kitchen, who are the developers who made Blasphemous. And despite being dark in tone, this is a completely different kind of game. So this is a sort of minimalistic adventure game, very much focused on the atmosphere and the story. It's very Lovecraft inspired, of just, the terrors of not knowing and not being able to understand things going out around in the universe outside. You play someone, and eventually another someone, who is trying to investigate a phenomenon called the Veil. And this is a very effective game, especially in terms of the atmosphere of it. It's fairly simple in terms of what you're actually doing, but it does manage to be quite chilling at times, so I'm going to give The Last Door a B. The Legend of Kyrandia was made in 1992 by Westwood Studios, and this is a game that looks great and sounds great, and that's all I have nice to say about it. You play a completely forgettable character whose name I don't remember, despite the fact that I just played it a couple weeks ago, and everyone in the land gets turned to stone by this clown called Malcolm, and you need to go track him down and defeat him to bring everyone back to life again. And this game has the worst puzzles I've ever experienced in an adventure game. It has a maze, which is also one of my least favorite things. You have a limited capacity inventory, despite the fact that you have way too many items in order to carry them around, even for one single puzzle, which is a completely randomized puzzle that you just have to use trial and error to solve. One puzzle takes up more slots than you have in your inventory. So it's just terribly designed, all sorts of dead ends and ways to soft lock yourself in this. And I just thought, like, wow, this game sure looks pretty, but it plays like ass. So yeah, Legend of Kyrandia is a D. Didn't like it at all. The Lion Song is a beautiful little game released in 2017 by Mipumi Games. It is episodic. There are 4 episodes, and it takes place in, I forget what year. It's sort of like early in the 20th century. And you play as 3 different characters, all struggling with their own creativity and sort of facing down their own demons. First, I believe you play a composer who's trying to, create her masterpiece. And then you play a painter and then a mathematician. And these are fairly straightforward, not a ton in terms of difficulty, but the writing and the story and the beautiful artwork are just so evocative and really sort of kept me engaged and loving the game the whole time. So I highly recommend this one. The Lion Song is an A. The Little Acre was made by Pewter Game Studios in 2016, and this is a beautifully animated game. It looks just like a cartoon where you play as 2 characters, a father and a daughter, and at the beginning of the game, the father disappears mysteriously, so his little girl, Lily, and her faithful sidekick, the dog whose name I don't remember, go out on an adventure trying to find him. And it definitely looks and sounds really good. It's a short one, which is okay, but I didn't love this. I think part of the problem is that half the game you're playing as a precocious / annoying small child, which I didn't really enjoy. But it's like one of those games that definitely, appearances-wise, looks much better than it actually is fun to play. So I'm going to give Little Acre a C. The Longest Journey was made by Funcom, first released in 1999, over I think in Norway, and then came out everywhere else in 2000. And I think it's one of the best adventure games of all time. You play a character named April Ryan, who is a university student, who finds out after a time that she can go between 2 worlds, because there are 2 parallel worlds. One is a magic world, and one is an industrial world, which is where she lives normally. And something's gone wrong, and she needs to travel between these worlds in order to sort of save them. And she meets all kinds of wonderful characters along the way. And I think this is just an amazingly written game. I love all the dialogue and the characters you meet. It's really pretty, it has really interesting ideas, and I love how they merge the 2 worlds together and really build out both of them. It's just a fun game. It is that sort of early 3D, but it manages to not be too hard on the eyes, which it definitely could have been. But yes, The Longest Journey, highly recommended. It does have like 1 or 2 pretty stupid puzzles, but for the most part, they're pretty good. So The Longest Journey is going to be my first S. Lorelei is the final of the trilogy by Harvester Games. It came out in 2019, and in this you're playing a new character. You're still going to see lots of disturbing, graphic things happening during this game. You're playing a character who has a very unhappy home life with an abusive stepfather and a mother who seems to have given up on things. And from there, things only get weirder and worse for her. And I like this game. Again, I like the whole series. It doesn't land for me quite as well as The Cat Lady, just because I find the balance of sort of dialogue and, gameplay and puzzles is not quite there. Like, I feel like Lorelei spends a significant portion of the time just having conversations, and there's not a ton of actual gameplay. I don't mind that because the aesthetic and the storytelling is very strong, but I just wish it had sort of like struck the right balance there. But it's still a good game, and I'm going to give it a B. Midnight Scenes: The Highway is by Octavi Navarro. It was released in 2020, and it's basically just a little video game short story. It's very short. It's like a 10 to 15 minute long experience. It's very Twilight Zone inspired, so it's basically like you're going through, and then, at the end there's some kind of twist, kind of like Twilight Zone episodes all are. And for what this was, I thought it was very good. It looks good, it sounds good, the storytelling is there. I've learned while I was just putting together stuff for this video that there have been 2 other episodes that have come out, so I'll probably check those out as well. But Midnight Scenes, as long as you know, this is a short little game, it's a B. Mobius Empire Rising is a 2014 game by Phoenix Online Studios, which is Jane Jensen's studios. She came back with a Kickstarter for this, which I did back, and I was hoping for some, similar to Gabriel Knight kind of action. Here you're playing an antiques dealer named Mordecai, I believe, and he ends up on an adventure, and it's very historical. Like a lot of the things that you're going through history, you're doing some sort of detective stuff, like looking at someone and examining them to come to conclusions about them. I did find those were a little bit random as opposed to logical. There are some things that I liked about this game starting out, like he won't just pick up everything possible. He'll say like, I don't need that right now. I was like, oh, well, that's realistic. It's cool that they did that. But then that just comes back to bite you in the ass as you find you're somewhere where it's like, oh, I could have used those scissors from the office. And then you go back to the office, pick up the scissors, go back, and you're like, oh, well, I could have used the tape from the office as you go back. So it gets really tiring. I don't find the main character likable or sympathetic in any way. Like Gabriel Knight is a bit of a cad, but Mordecai is just a boring dick who I didn't enjoy playing as. And the game caps things off with a more than 50 screen maze in which there's like maybe 5 screens where you can do something, which is absolutely unforgivable in the year 2014. Like, I know that's what happened in 1992, but in 2014, no. Mobius gets a D. I found it extremely disappointing. Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, the game was released in 1996 by 7th Level, and this game is a bit of a mess. I'm a huge fan of The Holy Grail, the movie. I've watched that a million times, so when I saw this game, I thought I should pick it up. And it includes scenes both from the movie as well as some cutscenes from the movie, which is cool. Like, it's cool to be able to see that. But in terms of gameplay, it's just a mess. Most of the time, I just sat there staring at the screen, like clicking random cartoons as they like farted or whatever they do, but not knowing at all what I was supposed to be doing. There's a few sort of mini games, but the gameplay on a whole is just not compelling or intuitive at all. So despite, some funny footage, which, just watch the movie if you want some funny footage, but it's not a very good adventure game, so it's getting a D. Neofeud is a 2017 game by Silver Spook Games, and this is a dystopic cyberpunk game that actually lives up to the name cyberpunk. It is very critical of capitalism and corporations and governments and the way things are run. It basically takes what's happening here in our world now and just like builds it up to 11 and comments on that in a funny and biting and not at all subtle way. You're playing an ex-cop who's now basically a paper pusher, and he's dealing with all of the different people, from the richest of the rich to the people sort of living in squalor. Many people are androids, so you've got robot companions, you've got human companions. The game has very good music. It's a little ugly looking, like sort of purposefully ugly looking, but it's slightly off-putting, but also it really encapsulates the world that you're exploring, so I can definitely understand why it went that way. And I just found it really entertaining, and I really liked the story and the dialogue and everything. So Neofeud is getting an A. One Chance is a 2010 game by Dean Moynihan, and I don't even know if it's possible to play this game anymore because it's a Flash game. I tried to go find it on itch.io and I wasn't able to play it, so sorry about that, but I'm going to rank it anyway. You play a scientist who, while looking for the cure for cancer, accidentally created a virus that basically killed everything on Earth. So you have one chance to spend your remaining time, and this game is about how you do that. Whether you want to look for a cure to the cure that you created, whether you want to spend it with your family, and it's just really well done in terms of its storytelling and the emotional impact of it, and I'm going to give it a B. Pandora Directive is by Access Software, released in 1996. If you know me at all, you know I love the Tex Murphy FMV games, and this is a fantastic example of one. This got an S rank on my FMV video, and it's getting an S rank on my adventure game video. The puzzles are fantastic and so varied in this game. You've got conversational puzzles, you've got number puzzles, you've got maze puzzles, not like a maze that you have to travel through, just like a line maze kind of puzzle. You've got all sorts of things, inventory puzzles, really good hint system, excellent story, just well done overall. Pandora Directive, yes. S. Primordia is a 2012 game by Wormwood Studios. It is post-apocalyptic, and it's a world where all of the humans are dead. You poked one, it was dead. And you play a robot and your robot companion who like to do their own thing, but then another robot steals their energy source, and they find themselves traveling to a land and finding a huge city and sort of unraveling the mystery of what happened to the humans. And I think this is great. I think visually it has such a wonderful art style. It's just like the character designs and things are just really top notch, and I liked the story of it and I liked the puzzles, so Primordia is getting an A. The Procession to Calvary is a 2020 game by Joe Richardson, and it is one of the most hilarious games I played last year. You play someone who was fighting in the Crusades and found out you just love murdering people during war, but then the Crusades end and you're told you're not supposed to murder anyone, but you finagle your way into assassinating one more person, and it's basically your quest to do this. And the art all uses classical paintings and brings in characters and backgrounds and things in a really interesting way. The dialogue, all the little like one-liners and one-offs and visual sight gags are just delightful. The puzzles are pretty good too, and I overall liked the story and everything, but it's really for this game's sense of humor that it is going to get an A. No, not a B, an A. There we go. Rainswept was made by Frostwood Interactive in 2019. It is another detective adventure game where you go to investigate a double homicide and find out about the sort of secrets of this small town that you're in. And it definitely goes more of the character route in finding out more about these people and their history. There's not a ton to do in terms of interactions or puzzle solving. I didn't really like how this game looked, like the art style didn't really work for me, and it also just, you know, it was a little bit mundane. There was no, other than the murder, no real like sci-fi or fantasy or scary or funny element. It was just very like by the book, small town mystery drama, and I just, you know, it didn't resonate with me a ton. So I'm going to give Rainswept a C. Richard and Alice is a 2014 game by Owl Cave Games, and this tells the story of two people traveling together in the post-apocalypse. I believe the Earth is basically frozen over and most people have died. And as you go through, you're going through both the present day and the past and sort of working out what happened to these characters. And this is another one where I don't really like the visual style of it, but I did like the writing quite a bit, which really kept me engaged in the story and what was going on, and I like how everything unfolded. I did find emotionally this resonated with me more, so I'm going to give this one a B. Sanitarium is a 1998 game by Dreamforge. I just played this on stream a couple months back. You wake up in an insane asylum, you don't know who you are or why you're there or remember your past in any way, and you go through a series of sort of worlds where you're playing, first of all, as a different character and fighting a different evil. And I thought this game started out really well. The environments were really nice. I liked the first two worlds in terms of what they were building and what they were trying to do, the side characters who came in who you had to talk with. But I found the second half of the game just plummeted a lot in terms of quality. The worlds weren't as interesting to explore, the puzzles got a little bit tedious, so I think I'm gonna give Sanitarium a C. It starts out pretty well, but it got a little bit annoying to play in the second half. Shardlight is a 2016 game by Francisco Gonzalez and Ben Chandler, two people who work with Wadjidai quite often. And this is another post-apocalyptic game. You play a character named Amy, and she has the green lung, which is an affliction that most people suffer from in this world. Only the rich can afford to treat it, but there's a sort of lottery system where poor people get a chance to possibly get treated. And she's gone on a job that will give her a lottery ticket in order to do this. And as you go on, you discover more about the world and how, maybe this lottery program isn't working exactly as it goes. You find out about who's in power here, and it's overall very well done, really nice puzzles. I liked the story a lot, so Shardlight is a B. The Shiva is a 2006 game. It is the first game by Dave Gilbert over at Wadjidai Games. You play a rabbi who has been suspected or accused of murder. And this is basically a game about trying to clear your name, making decisions, figuring out your morality, and it's overall about faith. It is a short game, so it's just a nice short experience. I found the faith stuff doesn't resonate with me as much since I don't really have any, but I found the storytelling really good. It's a nice little example of what would come later on from Wadjidai, but I'm going to give the Shiva a B. Stasis is a 2015 game by The Brotherhood, and this game does a ton of things I like. First of all, it's in an isometric perspective, which is a nice change for these types of adventure games, and it also takes place on a derelict ship out in space, and space horror is my favorite subgenre, I guess, for movies, for games, for anything. So your character John and his family were put in stasis and were traveling, far away, but he wakes up and finds that everyone on the ship is dead. So you're basically trying to figure out what happened, try to figure out where your family's gone, and it's just a very spooky, psychologically intense game. The interface, I have to admit, is very strange. It does take some getting used to, but once you get used to it, I really enjoyed the puzzles in this game and the atmosphere and everything, so I'm going to give Stasis an A. Strangeland is one of the most recent games on this list. It came out in 2021. It's another one by Wormwood Studios. And I just love the look of this game and everything by Wormwood. Just like the color palette, the detail on the character models, everything is just really nice. You awaken in this freaky carnival and you see this woman sort of hurl herself to her death, and you're trying to figure out what is going on here. And you meet all kinds of interesting characters and you see all sorts of interesting sights. I really liked the puzzles here and the dialogue. There's an in-game hint system which you use by phoning for a hint, which I really liked. I feel like more adventure games could use that. I did find in terms of story, things were a little bit familiar. Like, I was pretty sure I knew what the end of the game was going to be from the start of the game, but it's still a very enjoyable ride and some good puzzles, and again, really interesting characters, really interesting setting. So Strangeland is getting a B. The Sundew is another game from 2021, and this is by 2054, who I believe is just one solo developer, so it's pretty remarkable achievement for that. However, this sort of cyberpunky story didn't completely land with me. You play a cyborg detective who is unveiling a vast conspiracy that might threaten the world, and I liked it at the beginning. Like, I thought the setup was pretty good. The story kind of went off the rails after a little bit, and I didn't really feel like it was built out enough. It is a shorter game, and again, that's fine, but I didn't feel like they had the time to really flesh out this story in a way that like made you feel the stakes of it or, really understand it. Most of the puzzles were pretty good. There were a couple like real stumpers though, where I couldn't figure it out. No one watching me on stream could figure it out. I went to the Steam discussion page. Other people were asking about it too. So there were a couple puzzles that just weren't very well designed, but it was an okay game. But I feel like the story sort of let it down at the end, so I'm going to give the Sundew a C. Technobabylon is a 2015 game which was made by Technocrat Games, published by Wadget Eye, and I don't like this game nearly as much as most other people do. This tends to be one of people's favorites, published by Wadget Eye, but I got stuck in the very first room of this game, and I held it against it for the entire thing. Is that petty? Probably, but that's also how I felt while playing the game. So I liked the characters in the game. Some of the characters were quite memorable, and I liked the conversations you had with them, but I also don't remember the story of the game at all. It's another cyberpunk adventure, and I didn't play it that long ago, but I don't remember the story. So I'm going to give Technobabylon a C because of that first puzzle and because I just don't really remember it. Tesla Effect is the newest Tex Murphy games developed by Big Finish Games. This had a Kickstarter. This was the first game I ever backed on Kickstarter, I'm pretty sure. And I was so excited about a new Tex Murphy game, and it finally came out. And it was nice. It was nice to see all the characters that I loved from the game. I found that the first half of the game worked for me a lot more than the second. I don't think the second half was bad, but like it really hit all the things that I like from the Tex Murphy series, seeing all those characters, having all the conversations. The end of it did get a little more into exploring large areas full of danger, which just doesn't work mechanically as much as like the smaller areas and having lots of people to talk to does, but I still thought it was a good game. I actually want to replay this sometime soon. Maybe I'll do that on stream. But Tesla Effect is going to be a B. Thimbleweed Park is a 2017 game by Terrible Toy Box. This is Gary Winnick and Ron Gilbert, who made a lot of the LucasArts games, and this very much pays homage to it. You play as two detectives who are out investigating a small town and finding out all its secrets. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. There are a number of little references and callbacks to other familiar adventure games, and I overall really enjoyed this. I had a ton of fun playing it. It was a little bit on the long side, but I think it just particularly resonated and gave me that nostalgic feeling from a bunch of games I liked in the past, so Thimbleweed Park gets an A. Unavowed is a 2018 game by Wadget Eye, and I love it. It is my favorite of Wadget Eye's games. You play someone who was possessed by a demon for a year and did all sorts of terrible things before the group called the Unavowed finds you, banishes the demon, and brings you into the fold of basically paranormal investigation, going through New York, finding ghosts and putting them to rest, finding demons, doing all sorts of mysterious paranormal things. As you go, you get other people to join you, and what I love about this, aside from the fact that it's beautiful and has good music and has great writing and has great voice acting, is that you get some choice in what happens. There's different origin stories for your character. You can take 2 of your 4 companions on each mission with you, and depending on who you take, the puzzles will be solved in different ways. There's also a lot of points where you make decisions which will impact how things go later on in the game. I just think it's an absolutely fantastic game, and it's getting an S. Just notice the D tier is getting cut off, but don't worry, I'll show you a big full size of this when I'm done. Under Killing Moon is a 1994 game from Access Software, another of the Tex Murphy. It's technically the 3rd Tex Murphy, but it's the first in this specific FMV format, and I love this game. I've always said Pandora Directive is my favorite, but having streamed Under Killing Moon just recently again, I'm putting it right up there with Pandora Directive. There's not as many puzzles, but it's just so well done. The inventory puzzles are great, the conversations are great, I love the story. The whole thing is just so charming. It's corny, but it knows it's corny, and the acting is surprisingly good for an FMV game, but it's just a fantastic experience. I was so happy to share it with people recently, but yeah, Under Killing Moon, A. S. Whispers of a Machine is a 2019 game by Clifftop Games, and this is a sort of another detective noir, but also sci-fi. You play a cybernetically enhanced detective who is investigating a series of murders in a Nordic town. This is a place where AI used to be a thing, but it caused problems, and now AI is basically illegal in the world. So what I like about this, again, is you get choices in this game. You can sort of go down 3 different paths in terms of new abilities you get and what sort of skills you focus on, and that will let you solve the puzzles of the game in different ways and result in some different outcomes for your character. So I just really love when adventure games incorporate not just the usual puzzles, but also some choice and some variation in how your story is going to work out. I just find it makes the character that you're playing seem just like so much of your own. And as usual, this game is, really nice art, really good voice acting. So Whispers of a Machine is an A. And last but not least, the X-Files game was released in 1998 by Hyperbole Studios. This is one I played on PS1 when I was a kid, but it's also a PC game. And I was obsessed with the X-Files, so I was so excited when this game came out. And overall, I think it does an excellent job of basically being like a very long standalone episode of the X-Files. You see all of the characters that you love. You see Skinner, you see the lone gunman. Mulder and Scully have been kidnapped, so they're only in it a little bit, but they make it count, especially Scully when she does make an appearance. But you're another FBI agent, and you are going through trying to find Mulder and Scully, and along the way you're seeing all kinds of references to various episodes of the show. I do find there are some action sequences which aren't fantastic. Near the end of the game, it does get a little action-y and time sensitive, which I don't think fits super well into the game. But overall, I think it's very fun, so X-Files is getting a B. So that is my ranking for all of the adventure games that weren't made by Sierra or LucasArts. I will just increase the size of this here so you can get a better look at it. There we go. There's a surprising amount of A's, so I really like a lot of these games. Mostly B's, which I find is pretty standard for my rankings, and no F's, which is surprising. A couple of the D's down there I thought were pretty bad, but not total failures. But yeah, that is my ranking of these games. let me know in the comments what some of your personal S-rank adventure games are, if there's any games that you want to recommend that I play that were not on this list, or if you think I was wrong anywhere. I'm sure people always love to tell me when I'm wrong, so I may as well invite you to do it. Yeah, that is it for the ranking. Don't forget, I have the Sierra and LucasArts ranking, which I'll link to at the end of this video if you want to watch that. But yeah, thank you so much for watching what I assume was a very long video. I'll see you next time. If you're interested, go check out my ranking of the Sierra and LucasArts adventure games, or another of my videos. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.